This podcast is about storytelling. I am your host, Dr. Mijiza Sanchez-Guzman, Associate Dean of the Office of Medical Student Affairs and the founder of the First Generation Mentorship Program at Stanford Medicine, and I am proud to be first generation. Many of us are the first in our families to accomplish living the dream. Being the first means different things to different people. Join me now on a journey as we share our stories about how we've navigated being first generation in academic medicine. I will have the honor and pleasure of interviewing first generation clinicians, leaders, mentors, students, faculty, and researchers as they share their lived experiences of being the first. I hope these stories will inspire the next generation of leaders in health sciences. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Holly Caretta-Weyer, who is the current Associate Dean of Admissions and Assessments at the Stanford University School of Medicine. She is additionally the Director of Assessment for the Department of Emergency Medicine and Chair of the Clinical Competency Committee. Dr. Caretta-Weyer attended medical school at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, where she graduated Alpha Omega Alpha with honors in research. She loved being a Badger so much that she stayed there for her emergency medicine residency at the University of Wisconsin, where she was also the chief resident. Dr. Caretta-Weyer then moved to the West Coast, where she completed her medical education scholarship fellowship at Oregon Health and Science University and completed her Master in Health Professions Education at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Welcome, Dr. Caretta-Weyer.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I remember seeing you speak at the opening of the SUMA conference earlier this year. So SUMA stands for Stanford University Minority Medical Alliance, and I was blown away by your remarks. I also remember thinking how lucky we are to have you as the Dean of Admissions. Can you share a bit about your background and what led you to the field of academic medicine?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, born and raised Midwesterner. And I really didn't think about going into medicine at all growing up. I loved writing. I thought I was going to be a journalist. I thought maybe I would be like a meteorologist. I don't know. I think it was all the stuff you get exposed to on the news. I was like, those people seem to be doing cool things. And my sister had cerebral palsy and couldn't walk or talk. And so growing up, I spent a lot of my time helping my mom take care of her. And she went into renal failure, had like a very difficult kind of period in her health when I was about 16. And my family actually worked with a palliative care physician. And that had such a profound impact on me because I'd always thought all of my sister's contact with the medical system, I was like, oh, doctors take care of disease. Like it's kind of this in and out. They're working on, the research aspects and all of these other things. And it's not as much of a human element. And I think that didn't really connect with me until we worked with that palliative care physician, where it was so much more about the patient and the family and what was right for everyone and the human element of patient care. And I thought, I've always liked science, but I've also always loved people. And that's why I was like, I want to be a journalist. I want to tell people stories. But this seems so much more about like our story and our family and what was right for us. And I was like, maybe, just maybe, this might be a thing. Maybe I could be interested in this. But I had also kind of, committed to going to my undergraduate university at Marquette. I was still thinking, journalism, writing, something. And it wasn't really until I took just those introductory science courses and someone sat me down and basically was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this instead of going into medicine? Like, you very clearly have the aptitude for science and you love people, and that's what medicine's about. And I was like, yeah, I guess it was in this one instance. But they're like, no, it really is in all of these different instances. Why don't you expose yourself more to what this could be? Because I had no contact with the medical system outside of, emergency department visits, neurologists and all of these different things. And so I started to delve a little bit more deeply in my undergraduate career and actually shadowed a trauma surgeon who I would later work with multiple times in my career. And I think just that 24 hours of spending time with her and seeing what her life was like and the amount that she cared for patients, even though, she was kind of just this amazing surgeon, taking care of like these high acuity patients, but seeing that she was someone who cared so deeply about the patients that she had and had this human connection. I mean, she fell asleep outside of a patient's room waiting for lab results. And I was like, this is the above and beyond, right? And so it's like, maybe this is something that I could do. And really that catalyzed my interest in medicine, in academic medicine specifically. I was fortunate enough to be accepted to the University of Wisconsin, which has this unique focus on public health, which also connected, my interest in patient care with community health and, kind of the scholarly approach to taking care of patients, but also meeting them where they were at, kind of like our palliative care doctor did with us. And so, it just kind of kicked off this impetus in me to think about, academic medicine is not just, people pipetting in a lab or, doing the research I did as an undergrad where I gave mice cocaine. Ask me about that sometime. But it's about really figuring out ways to connect with the community and help them access the care that they need, think about what it is that meets the needs of patients where they're at. And that really resonated with me. So that's why I got into academic medicine. All the other stuff came after, with just great mentorship, I think.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into that in a second. Tell me your story. When did you first become aware of your first gen identity?
So my parents sat me down when I was probably in maybe middle school or early high school and gave me the "we didn't go to college, so you're going" speech. And I think this is probably a familiar story for a lot of first gen kids, where it's like, we didn't get the opportunity, so you're going. But they left it at that. There was nothing else. They were just like, you're going to college. And I was like, and no direction, help.
Right.
And so it was just, like, okay, there's the expectation. I'm going to, do the whole school thing and I'm going to go to college and I guess I'll figure it out from there. But that's when it really clicked with me. I was like, oh, it's going to be me. I'm the first one. We're going to make this happen.
That's right. That's right. What are some of the barriers or challenges you faced as you pursued your career in academic medicine?
I mean, I think a lot of it was like, I just didn't know what I didn't know. Like I did well in school all the way up until, like through high school, you're like, yeah, I did my classes, I did well. And then I got to college and realized no one had ever challenged me, I don't think, at least not to the extent I needed to be. And I had no idea what to do. Like that first semester didn't go. I think this is again a familiar story for a lot of first gen kids. That first semester didn't go as well as I had hoped. And I didn't know what to do about that. Because it was one of those things where, tutoring had never been a thing, or, seeking out help in whatever way you like, it wasn't there. And so I had to kind of think like, okay, I'm in a big university setting. Like, what do I do? Because I have this mentor who's basically telling me that like, I should be thinking about going into medicine. And I just more or less bombed chemistry. So is that still a thing? Like, I'm getting this mixed messaging. Like I have a mentor who's really encouraging me, but also I'm like looking at these grades and like this, like, can I do better? And it really took me kind of just being humble and saying, okay, like I just don't know what to do. And accessing like the resources the university had and saying, okay, what is it that I need to do? And someone being like, you go to office hours. And I was like, office hours, right. I remember someone talking about those. Like, you spend your Friday nights in the library. Yes, studying is good. I need to change how I study. I need someone to help me change how I study. I need to engage with like tutoring. And I think for someone who always had the external pressure of you're going to college, you're going to do well, and having done well before, coming in and not doing well with what had always worked, like having to make that pivot, reach out for help, engage with things I'd never seen a learning management system before. I was like, I don't know how to use this thing. I think I have classes, like all of these different things you had to learn from peers, from mentors, from university resources. I think that was all stuff that I think probably resonates with a lot of, first gen kids who are just like, this just wasn't a thing I grew up with, and having to figure it out, but not being afraid or reticent to ask for help. Because I think a lot of being first gen is just, I'm going to be super independent about this stuff. Like, I'm just going to gut it out, because that's the way we've kind of been brought up. And I think you have to walk a lot of that back, mentally, and then say, okay, here's what I actually need to do, in order to be successful. And then to deal with the imposter syndrome that comes with all of that once you actually are somewhat successful, but also to not stop asking for help. That is such a delicate balance, because you're like, okay, I need to like hype myself up. I need to get over this hill, but I also still need to be able to like ask for help when I need it. I mean, it is a constant cycle, like it never really ends. But I think like it's the big first part where you're just like, okay, I need to get my ducks in a row, and I need to figure out like who can help me do that, because I don't have to be an island, I don't have to go it alone.
Yeah, yeah. Can you say more about the imposter syndrome? It's come up several times in our interviews.
I think once you kind of, I'm not going to say you figure anything out, because do you ever actually figure everything out? No. But I think once you see yourself achieve any sort of success, our natural inclination is to be, I'm a fraud. I don't know how I got here. I tricked someone. I still have that now. Like, as the associate dean of admissions, I literally look at my co-associate dean for admissions. I'm like, do they realize like we went to state schools, uh, and they put us in charge? But it still happens. And I think that taking that step back and saying, I earned the right to be here, is a really hard thing to do, because it's sometimes really hard to see what you did to earn the right to be here. And if you can't point at certain things, or you can't see the forest for the trees because you're like, I'm a fraud, like I just tricked them and eventually they're going to figure me out. That can be really hard. So I think I have a hype person of one of my very close friends and research collaborators, who, when I kind of get into this like spiral, tends to be really helpful for being like, here are the 3 things you did to get here, or like, here's what you bring to the table. Because like you can try and hype yourself up as much as you want, but like having people around you, surrounding yourself with people who also can hype you up, is really helpful to get past some of those like really tough imposter syndrome moments. Because I think a lot of times, anytime like something happens, you're like, you make a mistake, you're like, oh, the other shoe is about to drop. And like having someone put that in perspective for you, and you're like, this is normal. Like, everyone makes a mistake. Like, no one's going to hold this against you. This is so minor. Because it happened to me the other day. And I'm like, okay, deep breath. Like, this isn't
Normalizing.
the end of the world, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What do you wish you knew before entering the world of academic medicine as a first generation professional?
So many things. I think that there's a lot of us. I always thought I was alone, right? There's actually a lot of us, and there's a community, one, of people who will support you. 2, you could do this. Like, I think for me, it just always seemed like this like massive hill. You're like, everything's going to be hard. And yes, everything's hard, but like, this is the hype thing again. You are strong and you can do hard things. Like, that is the most important take home, I think, is like, you are strong, you can do hard things. You've always done hard things. And that it's worth it. I think those are the big 3 things, because a lot of people will harp on academic medicine because they're like, oh, it's the tax of, you do all this extra work that's unrecognized. It's for the love of the game. It's because you really care and are deeply passionate about something in addition to your clinical job. And a lot of times it has a lot to do with your clinical job. It can be teaching learners as part of, your clinical supervision role. It can be research. It can be a whole host of different things. The variety and the extra work, it's so worth it, because that's the stuff that, while it keeps you up at night, also is the stuff that kind of powers you through everything else. What I always like to say is usually when something is not going well, something else is. That's the nice thing about academic medicine. You can just, this over here is really, grinding to a halt, and there's all these issues and whatnot. And then you can throw yourself back into, your clinical job or your teaching or, your administrative work, your research. It's nice to be able to pivot between those things and have that variety, because it keeps you on your toes, but it also keeps you engaged. It's more fun to be awake at 2:00 in the morning doing something that you love than being awake at 2:00 in the morning doing something you don't love. So,
True story. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in pursuing a career in academic medicine?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the same. You can do hard things. You're strong. You've come this far, but also find something that, if you're up at 2:00 in the morning working on it, you're not mad. Like, you're like, oh, I lost track of time. Like, that's a win. And you get to do it with cool people. And it's something that you're like, I would love to build a career off of this. Because there are all sorts of things that I never would have thought you could build a career off of, that I've discovered, like people doing all sorts of cool stuff in academic medicine. And there's really a niche for everyone. Especially now, like I read these applications, it's like bioengineering and AI and community and public health and global health outreach and epidemiology and bioethics, like just all of these interesting things that people are coming in and doing. The world is your oyster. And if it's something that you are deeply passionate about and you're willing to do the extra work, that's really all there is to it. I make it sound so easy, but honestly, it takes a unique person, but if you have that passion, there's no better job.
How has being first generation shaped how you approached your training or your professional career?
So I thought a lot about this. And it's so interesting. And I tell a lot of students this now, because I never disclosed that I was first gen when I applied for med school or any of that stuff, because they didn't ask back when I applied. And I didn't think to say anything about it, which is so interesting because it was such a huge part of my journey that I don't think I necessarily owned was a big part of my journey. Because, I had to kind of have that resilience and think about, what it is that I needed to do in order to be successful and, do things that no one before me had been like, here's, the cookbook for how you get from point A to point B. And I think it's so interesting looking back that wasn't something that I talked about or really owned or thought about really until I was a resident. And someone was like, oh yeah, I'm first in my family to go to college. And I was like, me too. And they're like, really? I didn't know that. And I was like, why don't we talk about this? Because it is such an important part of who we are and where we've been. Because I think it helps me connect with learners. It helps me connect with patients. It helps me connect with, honestly, applicants as I'm like reading their files, because I understand better where they've been and what they've had to overcome. I think about this from an assessment perspective, because a lot of students come in and they're like, this just isn't what my experience has been. I'm in a totally different system. And a lot of times assessment rewards who adjust the fastest to the learning environment, like, this is why this doesn't work. and why we have to think about things differently. So I have that perspective now because I lived it, but I don't think I owned it until I was like, oh, this was like such a huge part of my experience. And now I see it reflected in so many others. And I love that we're finally talking about this, because I think as a first gen person, like it's not a natural inclination to tell people. And it's so interesting to me because a lot of other people are like, yeah, this is like a big part of my identity for a whole host of other things. And when you're first gen, like it's just not, like other things seem to come first, which is just really fascinating to me. And so, yeah, I think it has a major influence on just how I approach my work and how I think about how first gen students actually come into medical school, get through medical school, become residents, go out and practice. And it changes my perspective a lot.
Do you believe your first generation status influenced your career choices and trajectory? And if so, what ways?
So I don't know that it's directly impacted my career choice per se, but I do think a lot of folks who practice emergency medicine for whatever reason are first gen. And I think a lot of that is because we have this innate need to care for anyone, anytime, any day of the week, holidays, etc. And I don't know if that's just because we wanted to be accessible, we want to be the front lines, we want, the action and all of that stuff, or if it has something to do with the fact that you feel really grateful for the opportunity you've been given, and emergency medicine is a really giving back specialty. Because you are the front door of the hospital. You don't turn anybody away. And I think maybe subconsciously, there's so much gratitude for being here that a lot of us just kind of gravitate toward a specialty where like it feels like kind of a constant service to patients in their moment of need at all times. That's the only thing I can really point to potentially. Honestly, I think the education piece might also be part of that, because I think about training the next generation of physicians, and I think about doing a better job than what we had, and making sure we're abundantly able to meet the needs of patients and achieve the outcomes that are meaningful for patients. And doing that through education is really kind of this amplification cascade. And I do like the stuff that, assessment's the stuff that people don't love, right? But I think about this night and day because I'm like, assessment actually is really important to help people learn, to help students get where they need to go. And I can make such a meaningful impact through this really, really specific domain. And I think a lot of that comes back to gratitude and leaving the system better than we found it. And the more I've thought about it, I'm like, maybe being first gen has a big component to do with that, because of the gratitude and making sure that everyone who's first gen who comes after me has more and better opportunities than I had. So I just think that's such an important legacy to leave.
Absolutely. It's an interesting observation because as I think about it, you're our third guest that we've had that's been an emergency medicine physician. So maybe there is something to that.
Maybe. I don't know.
Do you
But
believe
qualitative researcher, so I think I just think about these things.
Yeah, for sure. How do you believe we can make the field of academic medicine more inclusive and accessible to first generation professionals?
I honestly think it is by changing the way we do things, such that it's inclusive for everyone, regardless of the resources they've had, the access they've had, any of that stuff. And I think it exists with support structures. We can say all day until we're blue in the face, we do holistic review and all of these things, and we want to make medicine this place that is super welcoming and ensure that we have a diverse workforce who's able to meet our diverse patient population needs, which is true. All of that is true. But until we have an education system that actually supports diverse learners who come in with a diverse set of backgrounds and experiences and need different support structures, we're not going to be able to do that necessarily. And so, you look at universities that are providing, equitable resources to every student who enters, to make sure that every student can be successful. Like, I think that is an amazing initiative. And I think that helps with a whole host of things. First gen students who have, had lesser economic resources, students who went to schools that had less opportunities but managed to excel, and who are coming in, to a high pressure learning environment. We want all of them to succeed. Every last one of them. And that's how I think about assessment too. It's not my job to make it so that people can't get through. It's my job to make it so that everyone is able to meet the outcomes that every single patient needs, that they're prepared for residency, they're prepared to take care of patients. That is the purpose of assessment. It's not gatekeeping. And it's not to reward who, does better in the learning environment on day 1 versus day 20, because I'd rather see everyone grow and develop and figure it out. And so that's how, doing our small part, but thinking about this from a big systems perspective is really, what is it that we can do to support every single learner, no matter where they're coming from. That's what makes it better for first gen, for every student.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share any mentors or relationships that have been particularly influential in your career?
So it starts with my undergrad advisor, who told me that I was crazy for not going into medicine. I'll never forget him. He's a dentist, at Marquette's dental school, and he was doing pre-med advising because they needed someone. And I, happened to get really, really lucky. And he sat me down and he's like, I think this is something you should think about. And he managed not to talk me into going to dental school. His teeth are gross. So, but he really was like, you know what, you should really think about going into medicine. Here's why. Here are some opportunities you could think about. And I mean, we met over and over and over again throughout my entire undergrad experience. He basically was like, you need a job. Maybe you should do the summer research program. It's like, I don't do research like that. What is that? He's like, well, go shadow in a few labs, see if you like it. And turns out giving mice cocaine was kind of fun. Really weird job. And then, it's like, maybe you should consider applying to these medical schools. I think they would be, a good fit for you. Here's how you apply for, he walked me through applying for financial aid. Like, just super helpful every step of the way, because again, I had no idea what I was doing. The FAFSA, any first gen kid knows this. You'd sit at like your kitchen table and you're like, this document is impossible. I have no idea how to fill this out. Or you're doing math on like the back of a napkin and you're like, I don't know if I can afford any of this. Yeah, I mean, he was super helpful with all these different things. And then getting to medical school, it was really having people kind of sit me down and say, maybe you want to think about this specialty instead of this. I mean, my research mentor, I did research in surgical oncology. I thought I was going to be a surgeon. Shadowed that trauma surgeon. I was like, her job seems cool. My research mentor sat me down and she's like, are you sure? You seem to like talking to people a lot. And in surgery, your patients are asleep. I was like, uh-huh. And I was like, no, I still think I'm going to be a surgeon. And like my first day on surgery, I did a 13-hour surgery. I got to leave once to like use the bathroom and eat a granola bar. And I was like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. I'm so bored. It's not that the case wasn't interesting or any of these things. It's like I've talked to one person all day. This is awful. And like I like called my mom when I got home and I was like crying. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. And called my research mentor and she's like, I told you, maybe you should wait for your trauma call in a couple of weeks and see what it actually was that you liked about trauma surgery. And I did. And I was like, oh, I've been sitting in the emergency department for 14 hours doing like procedures and hanging out with these folks. Like, they're super fun. And so, I think people just like guiding you, and it got more obvious even as like I was getting further along in my career. My chair sat me down when I was a resident and said, do you want to practice emergency medicine and have a side hustle in something else? Or do you want to primarily do something else and have emergency medicine pay your salary and like that be your patient care, but you primarily do this other thing. And I was like, I am an intern. What are you talking about? But now like looking back, I'm like, well, she knew that I was going to do academic medicine and have like this other thing that was my primary job. And it's so interesting to have these people, you know, nudge you in certain directions, and you have these conversations in the back of your head and you're like, wait a second. Like someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And they were so right. They were so right. And sometimes you can't see it until after the fact. Sometimes you're like making a decision and that conversation pops back into your head and you're like, oh, or you reach back out to that person and you're like, what did you mean by that? Because I'm, you know, making this decision now and I'm trying to figure out what it is that I want to do. And I think you just build out that kind of board of directors as you go, because you have different people for different things. And it's so interesting, like how doors open and windows close, and different people kind of just nudge you in different directions. I told my mom I was never going to do assessment work because I was so annoyed by it in medical school. And now
look at
it's
you.
It's all the stuff that keeps you up at night that ends up being what fuels your fire. And I had a mentor who actually taught me in medical school, who ended up being the associate dean in Oregon, who was like, I think this is your calling. Just try it. Gave me an opportunity, and here we are. It's all of those little things that you don't necessarily see in the moment. You look back and you're like, my whole career is what it is because of the people and the places and all these different things that have influenced me. And it's beautiful because of that.
How do you celebrate being first gen?
I think now it's a lot more deliberate because we get to talk a lot about this in MD admissions. You know, we're trying to encourage more first gen students to apply. We're trying to encourage more first gen students to enter medical school or health professions, to take care of patients, to you know, dream bigger than they have before. And I get to talk to them about that. And like, because I did it. And it's one of those things, again, I didn't own so early in my career, but now thinking about it, like, it's such a huge part of what makes me me and how I think about the world, how I see the world. So being able to talk about that and really connect with these students and encourage them to apply and encourage them to, you know, think about what a career in medicine would mean for them and what it would look like, and to say, like, again, you're strong, you can do hard things, go for it. I think that's been one of the biggest rewards for me in kind of taking on this new adventure.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers?
I think it is one of those things where it's so easy to say, you know, I'm first gen and, you know, my path looks a certain way. And for other people to look at me and say, like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Everyone's path is their own. Everyone's path is unique. And yes, you can do this. And you can do honestly anything that you really put your mind to. I know a lot of first gen students have their parents' hopes and dreams riding on them. And that can feel like a lot of pressure. They're going to be proud of you no matter what. Even if they don't tell you that. Took my dad a long time to tell me that. But even if they don't tell you that, they're going to be proud of you no matter what you decide to do, whether that's be a graphic designer, it's to be a meteorologist, a journalist, a physician, any of that. Your journey is your own, and following what it is that is super meaningful to you is what being first gen is all about. Because you get to be the trailblazer. I know that's kind of a rough word for a lot of us, but it's the truth.
Can we do some rapid fire questions?
Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
What are you currently reading?
Crying in H Mart. I am not a nonfiction reader usually, but this book is excellent.
What's the last good movie you watched?
So we have a Stubbs pass for AMC, as I see a lot of movies, but we just saw Kneecap, which is a movie about the Irish language and an Irish rap group.
Woohoo!
It's quite good.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Ooh, New Zealand with all the sheep.
Ooh, sheep. So I know you are an expert podcast interviewer because I've seen you on several podcasts, but what
Oh boy.
podcast, if any, are you listening to?
So I only listen to two podcasts, This American Life on road
Mm,
trips, and then The Daily from the New York
mm,
Times. Michael Barbaro's voice is
mm-hmm,
so lovely.
mm-hmm. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm a night owl.
I guess most emergency medicine physicians are, huh?
I honestly think so. I actively trade out of all of my 6 a.m. shifts.
What's a song that always makes you happy when you hear it?
Ooh, there's a lot of good ones. I have that Uma Thurman song by Fall Out Boy stuck in my head.
Hey.
I'm owning my emo side.
And lastly, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. Honestly, Esther Chu from OHSU sat me down once and was like, here's how you know how to say yes or no to something.
Mm,
And how you say yes is it has to meet two of these criteria. We've covered some of these already. It has to be something that if you're up at 2 o'clock in the morning working on it, you're not mad. It's something that you can do with cool people that you want to work with. And it's something that you would be totally okay making a career niche out of. If it's 2 out of the 3, you can say yes. Preferably it's all 3 of the 3. If your chair wants you to do it, that's only a relative indication. You can still say no.
that
I
is
hope
some good
Andra
advice.
don't listen to this.
That is awesome advice. Holly, thank you so much. It was such a joy and pleasure to speak with you this afternoon.
You too. Thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.